biggest news stories. This show is nothing if not light and shade. We've got Gyles, Brandreth and Camilla Tominey here now. Let's start with... Because we were talking with Alice about the DEC and the millions, tens of millions of pounds that Brits have raised to send over. And the one thing you always want to be is welcoming. You want to make sure that we're doing the right thing in that respect. The UN estimates more than 1.5 million Ukrainians have so far fled the country. 50 have been granted UK visas. There are reports that 150 refugees have been turned back at Calais in France for lacking a visa. French authorities have accused the UK of a lack of humanity. Home Secretary Priti Patel said that she was doing everything possible to speed up efforts to issue the travel permits. What are we doing, Gyles?
Well, she must do even more than everything that is possible. People are demanding action. It's very complicated at Calais, though, because there has been immigration, illegal immigration, difficult, problematic immigration for some years. Also people who have been refugees coming through. How do we organise that in a sensible and humane way? Well, one of the ways of doing it is actually to do it at Calais. And one of the problems at the moment is that people are turning up at Calais and being told, actually, you've got to go to a consulate that may be in Brussels. Well, that's ridiculous. We must actually get something focused on the Ukraine in Calais, and that must be processed as quickly as possible. They've just got to get on with it today.
I mean, Camilla, surely you understand all those protocols in place, but right now, with what we're witnessing, does that not just have to go out the window?
Well, this is the debate. I think there's two arguments going on. First of all, why can't you process people at the border, as Gyles has just said? Second of all, they've obviously got this Ukrainian family scheme, and that's allowing people with links to Britain to come here and to come here for 3 years. The processing of the paperwork's clearly taking too long, 50 people. But also, has the government misread the public mood on this? We had Dominic Raab, the Deputy Prime Minister, yesterday saying, you know, we need to be processing people according to the rules, because otherwise there won't be British support. Actually, I think the British support is to bring anybody in, even if they don't have links to people in Britain, because you're seeing mothers and children fleeing missiles landing on their home soil. So you also have to have the comparison internationally. You've got Poland, obviously, as the next-door neighbour, taking, I believe now, 950,000 refugees. You've got a country like Moldova, also on the border, that doesn't have much money compared to us in GDP terms, taking thousands. And we've processed 50. Something's gone wrong.
Also, that these poor people, this inhumanity, vicious brutality, are leaving their homes. They could have been bombed out, they could have run and lost their bags. We've seen pictures of people with literally nothing. So no passport. How do you process that if you've got no proof, if that's what's needed, of who you were and where you've come from?
But you do have to have process, because when they come here, there have to be things like housing benefit, social security. This is a long-term crisis. This is not just opening arms for the next week or 2 or 3 weeks. This is years into the future. So the process is important to get people into a system where they really can be looked after properly. The process must be improved, but I think there does have to be process.
At least they can cross a border into a safe country.
Yeah.
That's not the option for many people. This morning, Russia's Defence Ministry announced it will hold fire and open humanitarian corridors in several Ukrainian cities, but these corridors only lead to Russia and Belarus.
Well, also, can they be trusted when they say this? They said that there was going to be a ceasefire to the humanitarian corridors over the weekend, and families were bombed as they were trying to flee. So this is not doing Putin's case any good whatsoever. I find it interesting that there is some intelligence now coming out of Russia. Two former people that were close to Putin and the Kremlin have both said they don't think the war is going very well for Putin because he doesn't seem to have the impetus of the military on his side. We've got soldiers apparently breaking down on the front line, having been hoodwinked into turning up in the first place, thinking it was a field exercise when actually it's war. The other significant development is the mothers of these soldiers complaining to the Russian authorities about what's going on. If you trace this back to the end of the Cold War in the early 90s, it was the mothers of the military that helped to push things in the other direction. Clearly, there is dissent in this convoy. You've got this convoy of 40 kilometres in length, hasn't really moved much. Some of them are being picked off. They apparently don't have very good rations. They don't have good communications.
Yeah.
I don't think this is misinformation, by the way. I mean, we've had the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, talk about the fact that this isn't going quite as Putin planned, because he's believed his own propaganda, basically.
Yeah, well, that's good. Gyles, get back to this humanitarian corridor issue. So we saw over the weekend that the humanitarian corridors were allegedly going to be opened. There was reports that they were what little ceasefire there was being used to regroup Russian troops, but also those people, and last night on the news, most horrific thing I've ever seen in my life, families shelled as they attempted to walk down that corridor, and then you find out that it leads into either Russia or Belarus. So those people, should they find some sort of safe corridor, of which there is an enormous amount of doubt that they would, into those countries, they then know what's happening. They then walk in and start talking about what's happening. And because it's not a war, it's not happening, it's a military exercise, a special military operation, then assume that they would be then accused of fake news, that they would be imprisoned.
For 15 years under new legislation introduced by the Duma, the Russian parliament, at the end of last week. I mean, what is interesting is that Sir Tony Radakin, who is our chief of the defence staff, is saying that it's not a done deal that Putin is going to win this. It is not over yet. And Putin has been painted himself into a corner and maybe getting desperate. Some people think that these humanitarian corridors are actually a con, looking back to things that happened a few years ago in Syria, suggesting the Russians proposed this simply to get rid of the civilians so that they can then actually be emboldened to surround the city that they're hoping to capture. That is the plan, but clearly it was tried twice over the weekend and wasn't fulfilled. So we don't really know where we are.
Camilla, just talking about the companies leaving Russia behind. So we've got Netflix, Airbnb, American Express, Visa, MasterCard, Apple, TikTok, a great many. I'm hesitant to name the companies that are alleged to have remained, because whilst we've gone on air, they could have pulled out, they could be having meetings to pull out. If it becomes clear that companies that we know well in this country are still trading in Russia, then that is profit over humanity, and we have to stop buying their products.
Well, I agree. I mean, we're not going to put troops on the ground at this stage. There's going to be no no-fly zone, because that would be constituted as an act of war. What else have we, apart from the diplomatic effort behind the scenes and economic sanctions, to make Russia the pariah of the world that Putin has now made it? This is not a reflection on Russian people, who we know are trying to express dissent, but actually face imprisonment and possibly death for doing so. But some of these major corporations should absolutely not be anywhere near Kremlin territory. It's completely unacceptable. And it's only by issuing these boycotts that the rest of the world can do their bit, really, because in the absence of actual military support beyond weaponry, what else can we do?
It's a red flag to the companies that are allegedly still there.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm old enough to remember going to the Soviet Union first time back in 1967, and it was a bleak place. It has been transformed by the arrival of so many of these Western companies. I think as the months go by and possibly the years go by, and Russia returns to being a place without all of these modern companies that has made modern Russia the vibrant country it's become. Not that prosperous, though, quite a way down the league table, you know, sort of 85th, I think, in terms of GDP, when it really sinks down to where it was in Soviet times, the people there will realise this is bleak, this is wrong. But that may take months, years.
Despite the ongoing war, the resilience and morale amongst the Ukrainian people remains extraordinarily high. We've seen many acts over the weekend. A newlywed military couple were pictured getting married on the Ukrainian front lines. Love finds a way. You wonder what their married life is going to look like. Many of us are optimistic when we say those vows, aren't we? And you sort of look at them there and you think, what life are they going into together? There's also been this video which has gone viral, which shows a young girl sheltering in a bomb shelter in Kyiv singing Let It Go in Ukrainian. Let's just have a little listen.
Пора узнать, что я могу, на помощь призову к себе во льдах навечно отпусти и забудь, что прославлял. отпусти и забудь. Новый день он кажет путь.
Bravo, bravo!
It's such innocence, isn't it?
We're seeing the worst of humanity and the best of humanity in this crisis, aren't we?
I hadn't seen that before, actually. I mean,
Heartbreaking.
she's the age of my youngest daughter. It's awful.
It's horrible. It's horrible.
Right, let's leave it there.